There is a silence that lingers in a man's soul long after the lights have gone out. In that darkness, when his armor has been stripped away and the noise of the world has been swallowed by sleep, she appears. Not as flesh and bone, not as memory, but as something deeper, an echo, a symbol, a mystery. The feminine he cannot name, the shadow he cannot escape. She is there, in his dreams, haunting him not with fear, but with a presence that unsettles and awakens him at once. Carl Jung once spoke of the anima, the feminine within every man, that shapes his desires, his illusions, his fears, and his longings. And when a woman carries the weight of her own mystery, when she refuses to collapse into need or grasping, she begins to embody the very archetype that lives in his unconscious. She becomes not merely a woman of flesh, but the mirror of his soul, the symbol of what he is missing, the eternal other who both terrifies and draws him closer. This is why he dreams of her. Not because of her words, not because of the touch she withholds or gives, but because she represents a part of himself he has not yet claimed. Her mystery is his unfinished journey. Her silence is his unspoken truth. Her distance is the crack in his armor that lets him feel the ache of what he truly desires but cannot dominate. And here is the paradox that torments him. He cannot own her, and yet he cannot stop returning to her. For the dream is not hers, it is his. She is the symbol he projects, the archetype his psyche clings to, the embodiment of both his longing and his fear of dissolution. But when she understands this, when she sees clearly that her power lies not in chasing, not in explaining, but in remaining whole, she becomes ungraspable. She becomes the dream he cannot wake from. And the more he tries to possess it, the more it slips through his fingers, until he realizes he is not chasing her at all. He is chasing himself. That is the feminine mystery. The haunting that follows him into sleep, the whisper that lives between silence and touch, the presence that does not beg to be seen, but simply exists, untamed, unclaimed, unforgettable. What unsettles a man is not the woman who explains herself away, but the one who remains untouched by the need to be understood. Mystery is not a mask she wears, it is the natural fragrance of a soul that does not betray itself for validation. To the male psyche, raised to conquer, to categorize, to divide and control, mystery is a wound. It refuses to be dissected. It resists labels. It cannot be owned. And so, in his dreams, she does not appear as a puzzle to be solved, but as an ocean without a shore. He swims, he reaches, he longs, but he never arrives. Jung called this the encounter with the anima, the feminine within him, projected outward onto her. She is not only the woman before him, but also the voice inside him that he has silenced. The tenderness, the intuition, the surrender to life's unexplainable beauty. When she embodies this, she is both mirror and flame. She awakens his unlived life, and it terrifies him. Because here is the secret, men are not afraid of rejection. They are afraid of insignificance. And when a woman holds herself in the gravity of her own being, when she does not bend simply to be chosen, she triggers that ancient fear. She becomes larger than his ego's reach, more eternal than his control. She becomes the haunting. He may laugh at her mystery, dismiss it as aloofness, call it games or manipulation. But in the quiet hours, when he is alone with his shadow, her image returns. Not her face, not her voice, but her absence. The space she left behind. The void that echoes with the truth. She cannot be reduced. This is why mystery binds him deeper than affection, why detachment can cut sharper than desire. For he realizes that in all his chasing, in all his conquest, the one thing he cannot conquer is the sovereign woman who belongs only to herself. And so she walks through his dreams like a ghost of everything he wishes he could hold, everything he wishes he could be. He wakes restless, haunted not by her, but by the part of his own soul that still kneels at the altar of his ego. The dream shifts again. The man is no longer in the dim corridor but inside a labyrinth of stone walls, each passage narrowing, each turn promising escape but delivering only deeper entanglement. There is no sound here, no echo of footsteps, no whisper of wind. Only the silence, her silence, that presses against his temples until his own heartbeat becomes unbearable. Silence is her weapon. It is not rejection, nor cruelty, but something more ancient, an invitation to listen to what he has always avoided. The silence is not empty. It is filled with his projections, his need for reassurance, his craving to know what she feels, what she wants, what she means. In her refusal to answer, he is forced to confront the void of his own uncertainty. Carl Jung would say that this silence is the voice of the anima, drawing him inward. Not toward her, the external figure, but toward himself, the hidden terrain of his psyche that he has ignored in pursuit of control and certainty. Every unanswered question she leaves in his chest is not her abandonment but his refusal to meet the unlit chambers within. And yet he paces the labyrinth. He traces his fingers along the cold stone, desperate to find her. He thinks if he can decode her mystery, if he can find the key, the pattern, the explanation, then perhaps she will reveal herself. But the truth is sharper, more haunting. She is not lost in this labyrinth. She is the labyrinth. And he is the wanderer, condemned until he surrenders his illusions. When she finally appears, it is never where he expects. She stands at the end of a passage, her face half-shadowed, her eyes unwavering. She does not move toward him. She waits, patient as the eternal feminine, knowing that his frantic movement is not progress but resistance. Her stillness burns him more than her absence. For in her stillness he feels the truth. She cannot be captured, possessed, or solved. The Stoics would remind him, desire chained to outcomes is suffering. But trauma psychology whispers more tenderly, his compulsion to chase her silence is not about her, but about the child inside him who once begged for recognition, who once mistook attention for love. Each unanswered glance, each withheld word, awakens the wound of not enough. And so the labyrinth repeats. The feminine in her true form is not withholding. She is a mirror, reflecting back his hunger, his fragility, his longing for completion outside himself. She haunts him because he does not yet know how to meet her without demanding she fill the hollows of his worth. Here lies the paradox. The more he clings, the further she dissolves into the stone. The more he releases, the clearer she becomes, as though she has been standing before him all along, veiled only by the fog of his own desperation. The labyrinth is not her prison. It is his. And the only door out is not carved into the wall but into his own chest, where the silence ceases to be her absence and becomes his initiation. The dream darkens. The labyrinth dissolves into smoke, and before him stands the figure he has feared most, the feminine not as muse, not as comfort, but as destroyer. Her eyes burn like coals, unblinking, unmerciful, and he feels the weight of every lie he has told himself rising like ash in his throat. She does not touch him. She does not need to. Her gaze alone is fire, and it sears through the masks he wears, the successful man, the charming lover, the rational mind that explains away his deeper longings. All fall to dust under her silence, until only his trembling, naked essence remains. This is the anima in her fierce form, Jung's reminder that she is not always the gentle guide into the unconscious. Sometimes she arrives as storm, as Kali, as the dark goddess who rips away illusions so he can no longer hide. She is both death and rebirth, both terror and liberation. Her purpose is not cruelty but transformation. Yet to him, it feels like the end of everything. His instinct is to fight, to armor himself, to shout against the fire of her eyes. But each defense melts into nothing. The ego cannot survive in her presence. He feels himself crumbling and terror grips him. If he lets go, what remains? Who is he without the stories, without the masks, without the fragile scaffolding of identity he has built? The Stoics would call this moment premeditatio mortis, a rehearsal of death, the stripping of all that is not eternal. Trauma psychology would call it trigger, the body's alarm that signals danger where none exists. But archetypal psychology calls it something greater, initiation. For only when the old self dies can the new one rise. She does not speak, but her silence is louder than any sermon. He realizes she is not here to answer him, not here to soothe him, not here to bend herself to his expectations. She is here to destroy what keeps him blind. In her presence, the man feels the terror of annihilation, yet beneath it, a faint pulse of something deeper, a freedom he cannot yet name. And here lies her haunting mystery. She is not content to be his dream, his fantasy, his projection. She demands he step into his own depths, confront his shadow, and meet her not as a boy begging for love but as a man reborn in fire. Until then, she will remain a figure of destruction in his dreams, both dreaded and desired. Her eyes soften, just for a moment, as if to remind him that her fury is not punishment but gift. Then she vanishes into the darkness, leaving him standing in the ashes of his former self. He is alone, stripped, shaken. But for the first time, he feels something unfamiliar, a silence that is not her weapon, but his own. The silence of nothing left to lose. Out of the ashes of destruction, the dream changes once again. The smoke clears, the cold silence warms, and she returns, not as destroyer, not as fire, but as something far more dangerous, the lover. She does not come to shatter him this time, but to open him. Her presence is softer now, her movements fluid, her gaze luminous and unguarded. Yet he feels an even deeper terror, for there is something far more unbearable than being broken, it is being seen. When she looks into him now, there is no anger, no blaze, only reflection. And what she reflects is not the man he pretends to be, but the one he truly is, the boy who still longs for tenderness, the man who fears rejection, the human who aches to belong. In her eyes, all of this is mirrored back without judgment, without disguise. And this unbearable intimacy, is what makes him want to run. Jung spoke of the anima as the bridge to the unconscious, the guide who carries him into the wholeness he resists. Here, she reveals another layer of her mystery. She does not only break illusions, she offers the ecstasy of being touched where he has armored himself most. But to receive her, he must surrender the part of him that believes love is conquest, possession, or control. The Stoics warned of attachment, of giving one's freedom away in the hunger for another's affection. Yet what unfolds here is not attachment, it is reflection. She does not bind him, she reveals him. Trauma has taught him to equate intimacy with loss, closeness with danger, love with abandonment. And so, in her gaze, he feels not just attraction but fear, not just desire but exposure. She reaches for him, not to claim him, but to remind him of what he hides even from himself. Her touch is not seduction but revelation. In that moment, he realizes why she haunts his dreams, not because she withholds herself, not because she resists him, but because she awakens in him a truth he cannot live without, and yet cannot bear to face in waking life. This is why he chases her. Not for her body, not for her surrender, but for the unbearable clarity that she embodies, his own soul calling him to step into wholeness. And so long as he resists, she will remain untouchable, a dream he cannot possess, a reflection that dissolves when he reaches for it. She smiles, but it is not the smile of one who belongs. It is the smile of a mystery, the eternal reminder that intimacy is not ownership, and love is not a cage. And when he reaches for her, she fades, not to torment him, but to teach him. What he desires cannot be grasped, only mirrored, only lived into. She does not remain soft for long. The dream bends again, and she steps back, her radiance darkening, her softness sharpening into something untamable. Now she appears not as the lover, but as the wild feminine, the force he cannot harness, the spirit he cannot tame, the wild animal that lives beyond the reach of his cages. Her hair flows like a storm, her eyes blaze with a freedom that no oath could bind, no ring could seal, no vow could contain. This is the part of her that terrifies him most. For he has been taught that love must lead to possession, that desire must culminate in control, that to claim a woman is to prove himself a man. Yet here stands a mystery that refuses to be possessed, refuses to bow, refuses to surrender her sovereignty in exchange for his comfort. The Jungian shadow rises within him again. He projects onto her the unclaimed parts of his psyche, his own repressed hunger for freedom, his own terror of being consumed by another's power, his own secret longing to dissolve into something larger than his ego. She becomes the mirror of his inner wilderness, the part of him he has spent a lifetime suppressing. The Stoics would say, what cannot be controlled must not enslave you. Yet here he is, enslaved precisely by what escapes his grasp. Her refusal to belong becomes the very reason he obsesses. The more she slips through his fingers, the tighter his grip becomes. The more she stands unclaimed, the more his need to claim her consumes him. And you, when you embody this untamed essence, you awaken in him a paradox that gnaws at his sleep. He does not only desire you, he desires the freedom you carry within yourself. He does not only want your touch, he wants the sovereignty that burns in your silence. He does not only crave your body, he craves the wholeness he abandoned when he chose control over intimacy, ego over truth. This is the secret of the untamed feminine. She does not need to speak rebellion, for her very being defies the cage. She does not need to declare her freedom, for it shimmers in her distance, her refusal, her unyielding center. And this refusal, this holy rebellion, haunts him. It follows him into every dream, because somewhere deep within he knows. He cannot kill it, he cannot control it, and he cannot forget it. She is not the wound. She is the mirror of the wound. She is not the enemy. She is the guide. But until he learns to face what her freedom reveals in him, she will remain the ghost that slips into his sleep, whispering the truth he cannot bear, that the feminine does not exist to complete him, but to confront him with what he lacks. The wildness in her does not wait to be claimed. It moves through the world like fire, unapologetic, sovereign, eternal. And the man who tries to hold it? He wakes, night after night, haunted by the realization that no cage can hold the wind. In his dream, she stops speaking. No words fall from her lips, no sound breaks the air. Only silence remains. And yet, it is this silence that sears him more than any confession, more than any declaration, more than any rejection. Her silence is not emptiness. It is a presence more commanding than speech. It carries weight, like a temple filled with incense and shadow, where the air itself whispers truths too sacred to name. He searches her face, desperate for signs, for clues, for the smallest gesture to reassure him of her belonging. But she offers none. She sits within herself, whole, complete, unreachable. This is the silence of the oracle. Not passive, not submissive, but deliberate. She knows the truth that Jung spoke of. The unconscious communicates not in sentences, but in symbols, in stillness, in images that disturb and awaken. Her silence becomes the symbol of his deepest fear, that he is not needed, that he is not essential, that his existence does not define hers. In this silence, he hears everything he cannot control. He hears his own fragility echo back at him. He hears the unspoken reminder that her worth does not rest in his hands. He hears the inevitability of his own insignificance in the grand design of her soul. And you, when you embody this silence, you shift the very balance of power. You do not plead, you do not explain, you do not perform. You let the absence of need speak louder than words. You become the mirror that forces him to confront the emptiness within himself. The Stoics would have admired such restraint, for silence is the companion of wisdom, and the refusal to react is the highest mastery. But for him, silence is unbearable, because it denies him the drama that feeds his ego. He thrives on reaction, on pursuit, on proof that he still matters in your world. When you take that proof away, when you sit in your sovereignty without demand or explanation, you awaken in him a desperation that no noise can soothe. This is why silence haunts him more than accusation. A fight can be conquered, a plea can be answered, a confession can be claimed. But silence cannot be defeated. Silence turns the gaze inward, forcing him to wrestle with shadows he has long avoided. In this way, the silent oracle becomes his unending dream. A woman who does not need to speak to be heard, who does not need to act to command, who does not need to belong to be desired. And in the stillness of her presence, he realizes something both terrifying and intoxicating, that her mystery is not a puzzle to be solved, but a depth that will forever elude him. It is this silence, more than beauty, more than softness, more than rebellion, that chains his soul to hers. For silence, unlike words, cannot be forgotten. It lingers, It echoes. It haunts. In time, she no longer appears as a woman in his dream. She becomes something larger, something formless yet undeniable. She dissolves into the eternal archetype, the image that transcends flesh and face, becoming an emblem of everything his soul both craves and fears. He sees her not merely as herself, but as the embodiment of the anima, his inner feminine, the bridge between his conscious ego and the unfathomable depths of the unconscious. Jung wrote that every man carries within him the image of a woman, and every woman the image of a man. But when she ceases to belong, when she withdraws into her sovereignty, she awakens this buried image inside him. She forces him to meet the feminine within, not as possession, but as reflection. Her mystery grows mythic. She becomes the goddess who walks away, the lover who cannot be caged, the muse who inspires yet never bends. In her detachment, she reveals his dependency. In her refusal to submit, she mirrors his enslavement to desire. And so he begins to worship, though he does not name it as worship. He cloaks it as longing, as curiosity, as obsession. But beneath it all, it is reverence, the kind born not from love, but from awe. She ceases to be a person in his eyes and becomes something timeless, a symbol, a shadow, a haunting. This is the curse and the gift of the feminine mystery. She teaches him, without teaching, that true attraction is not found in surrender but in distance. That love is not forged in chains but in freedom. That the soul of a woman cannot be owned, only encountered. You, too, have felt this power. The moment when detachment transforms you from ordinary to eternal, when your presence stops being about gestures and words and becomes about essence itself. It is not performance. It is not strategy. It is being. The refusal to reduce yourself to belonging. And so his dream mutates into myth, replaying endlessly in the theater of his unconscious. He will dream of her long after her presence has faded from his waking life. He will feel her absence as a phantom limb, haunting his nights and shaping his days. For the eternal archetype cannot be forgotten. It imprints itself on the psyche, carving pathways of longing that never heal. The Stoics taught that one should not worship what is outside of one's control. But he cannot stop. For what is beyond his control is precisely what gives life meaning. And she, as archetype, is beyond him entirely. It is here that the dream ceases to be his alone. It becomes universal. Countless men throughout history have dreamt of her, the one who did not stay, the one who could not be possessed, the one who left them chasing shadows in the night. She is myth reborn, century after century, in the secret chambers of the masculine soul. And as long as there are men who dream, there will be women who haunt them. When the dream releases him back into waking life, it does not dissolve. It lingers. It follows him into the day like smoke that clings to clothes long after the fire has burned out. He carries her absence as though it were presence, a shadow that stretches across every interaction, every silence, every fleeting moment of solitude. This is no longer mere longing. It has become hunger, the kind that gnaws at the edges of his being. The Stoics warned of desire that cannot be satiated, for it consumes a man more deeply than famine or thirst. And yet he cannot help himself. Her detachment has opened a wound inside him, and now he seeks her not as a woman, but as medicine for the void. But she is no medicine. She is mirror. Her mystery reflects back to him all that he has refused to face. His fear of insignificance, his dread of being unseen, his terror of not being enough. He does not hunger for her. He hungers for his lost fragments, the forgotten child, the buried tenderness, the soul exiled by his own armor of masculinity. Still he chases. He reaches for substitutes, other faces, other bodies, other voices, but none will quench it. For the hunger is not for possession, but for reconciliation with himself. And she, in refusing to belong, forces him into confrontation with the one truth he cannot escape, that no woman can fill the chasm he has dug within his own soul. And yet, this is why she haunts him. Because she embodies both his desire and its futility. She is the eternal reminder that his longing is not for her, but for the forgotten union between his masculine and his feminine, between ego and shadow, between self and soul. The hunger becomes existential. He does not even know why he cannot stop thinking of her. He tells himself it is love. He convinces himself it is fate. But beneath the stories, it is need. A need carved into him by the refusal of her belonging. A need that will trail him like an unfinished sentence. You have seen this in men, the ones who never recover from the woman who would not yield. They circle their memories like vultures circling a battlefield, unable to descend, unable to leave. They call it heartbreak, but it is deeper. It is hunger for the part of themselves she forced them to meet and left them unable to claim. This is her dark gift. She becomes unforgettable not because of what she gave, but because of what she withheld. And in withholding, she unveiled the abyss. In the silence of his nights, when sleep refuses him and shadows pool in the corners of the room, the hunger twists into something darker. It is no longer just a need, it is a storm. His mind, desperate for relief, begins to shape her into myth. She is no longer simply a woman who turned away. She becomes the oracle, the enigma, the eternal feminine he can neither hold nor forget. He weaves stories in his solitude, that she was destiny, that their meeting was written in the stars, that her absence is a test he must pass to prove himself worthy. His ego, fractured and trembling, clings to these myths like a drowning man clutching driftwood. But the truth, raw, merciless, unadorned, is this: her refusal has dismantled him. Not by cruelty, not by betrayal, but by silence. She broke nothing, she revealed what was already broken. And in that revelation he cannot rest. Carl Jung spoke of anima possession, when a man, estranged from his own soul, projects its power onto a woman and is then tormented by her ghost when she withdraws. This is the curse he now lives under. She does not belong to him, and yet she is everywhere, in the scent of strangers, in songs half-heard, in dreams he cannot escape. He is possessed not by her, but by the part of himself he has abandoned. And so he begins to unravel. His thoughts circle her like a hawk that never lands. His days are consumed by what-ifs, by imagined conversations, by alternate histories where she chose him, where she stayed, where she surrendered. Reality itself starts to bend beneath the weight of his obsession. This is how myth devours men. Not with thunderbolts, not with divine wrath, but with the quiet gnawing of absence. He believes he cannot live without her, when in truth he cannot live without the fragments of himself she awakened. She is no longer flesh, no longer blood, no longer human. She has become archetype. And he will chase her ghost until he either integrates what she revealed, or drowns in his own unclaimed soul. Madness creeps in not with screams, but with whispers. Whispers of her name, whispers of her touch, whispers of the life that never was. He is haunted not by her, but by the self she forced him to confront, the self he has yet to embrace. And that is why the feminine mystery is eternal. It is not her body, not her voice, not her smile that ruins him. It is the silence that echoes when she refuses to belong. It is the absence that becomes his myth. In the end, every obsession finds its mirror. His torment is not her doing. It is his own shadow rising from the depths. He stands at a threshold where two fates await him. One path leads to ruin. To chase her forever, to let her absence hollow him out, to wander as a ghost through his own life, forever clutching at illusions. This is the road of the unintegrated man, the one who mistakes projection for truth, possession for love, need for devotion. Many fall here. They become bitter, resentful, chained to the memory of a woman who has long since moved on, their lives reduced to echoes of what if. The other path is harder, lonelier, but redemptive. It demands that he stop searching for her and begin searching for himself. It demands he turn inward, to face the anima that haunts him, to confront the brokenness he has fled, to do the unglamorous, painful work of reclaiming his own soul. Only then does the haunting fade, not because she is forgotten, but because she has been transformed from wound into wisdom. This is the dark gift of the feminine mystery, not to be captured, not to be possessed, but to awaken the man to his own incompleteness. When she refuses to belong, she forces him to belong to himself, or perish in longing. That is why she becomes dream, myth, obsession, because through her absence she calls him to wholeness. And you, hearing these words, know this truth as well. The power was never in being needed. The power was never in being chased. The power was in silence, in refusal, in mystery. The power was in holding the boundary that forces another soul to confront itself. A man's obsession with a woman who will not surrender is not proof of her cruelty. It is proof of her archetypal force. She embodies what Jung called the eternal feminine, unyielding, untamed, a mirror of everything he has denied within himself. She is the riddle he cannot solve because she is not a riddle, she is a reminder. And so the final reckoning comes. Either he awakens or he drowns. Either he integrates or he obsesses. Either he finds himself or he loses himself in her shadow. That is the mystery he must face. That is the gift she never intended to give. That is the curse of refusing to belong. If these words stirred something deep inside you, if you felt the weight of silence, the fire of mystery, the power of holding your ground, then you are already walking the path of individuation. Do not stop here. Allow yourself to dive deeper into these truths, to claim your own shadow, to embrace the untamed feminine that cannot be possessed. Stay with this journey. Let these stories remind you of your own strength, your own mystery, your own eternal fire. Subscribe now, and step further into this hidden world of Jungian feminine empowerment, where silence is strength, absence is power, and mystery is the force that bends men to their knees. The feminine is not here to be owned. She is here to awaken, and you are her voice.